social breach. In order to talk about that, we have two analysts with us, Carlos Hernández, historian and national deputy of the Vox Party, and Damien Rau, a French journalist and political analyst. When we talk about the middle class, we always have those features at the table, right? Work, house, car, education, social services, and we forget something else, another feature that is fundamental, and it is the space. The middle class's golden age, the period between the 50s and the 80s or 90s, contains something fundamental, which it is the link into a space, to a territory for this middle class. The fact that you work all of your life on the same company and that you can grow there. And the fact that you have a house on your property, that you have that space, that's the golden age for the middle class. Well, all of this explodes. It all ends in the moment in which the economies are not national capitalisms, but financial and global. The economy's globalization and this convivence with the massive immigration and without control will have two harmful effects. In the first place, it will do so because it will put salaries to the ground. A great tool for the union is to lower salaries in a moment where those unions and collective efforts really had a real strength. There was some debate between raising salaries or hiring cheap labor, and that second option was the one chosen, and that worsened real conditions for the middle class. It saturates public services, and the middle class are the ones who pay them the most. That's how a family that had prospered because of education suddenly finds that the children can't go to the same school their parents went because 60% of those students don't really know the language, and they end up transforming their education not on that tool or elevator that could raise you up, but in some weight that pulls you down in order to not letting you progress. There is a feeling of rupture, of a feeling of the we, which was a feature for the middle class, and that is evaporating little by little. Then, of course, we have that cultural clash living with it. When you live with people that comes with a really strong identity and you don't, you go down. So well, the typical case are women in the streets, but there are so many other examples. This is the end of tranquility. Let's say that the middle class expressions that they had, like we could leave the door open or the car and nothing happened, did not only occur in Spain, but in the West. However, it all ended, because then it's not like there were more police, but the neighborhoods themselves were vigilant. All of people that you saw on the streets were part of your circle, so nobody wanted to hurt you. They could be on the streets while you were making dinner, because if something happened, there was someone who could warn you, because it was the neighbor's kids, the butcher's kids, or the school friend. There was a great feeling that breaks down or that sits itself in the middle of these two globalizations, the one above and the one below. And that generates a more reduced space to middle class, up to the point that year after year, the people who consider themselves middle class are lower and lower on the polls because of income, but even lower self-perception, when there was a time where everybody considered themselves so, even in cases with an income that doesn't fit in the categories. So now it's the opposite. Middle class is on decline, and that space is lost. Middle class are lower and lower on the polls because of income. The work, house, car, education that climb you up, or that calm neighborhood or that calm childhood, because now there are no opportunities or connections. Now we see that this middle class that tend to grow, and that in fact live a life that told them so, and it had for 2 centuries. Now it's absolutely broken. Now we can see many middle-class generations, or even with high aspirations, they are torn between the globalization above and the one below. Between the investment fund that doesn't let you buy a house and the stabbing. I think it is quite a graphic image, but I really think that this is what's happening with most middle class in the West. It is very important that there is an event like this with different actors that speak about immigration. Bravo. The main idea that I wanted to say related to French experience is asking up to what point the French middle classes and the immigration compete permanently. A competition for the social aid, households, jobs, on every field. Besides, we can even imagine, or even assure, that the good old French middle class has become poor. Maybe in a huge part because of migration. because this migration weakens them in different aspects. Access to social aid, access to household, the competition for jobs, how salaries went down, just like my colleague just said. And also because this immigration needs money. It is very expensive. We progressively will have a demographic replacement. European and French populations are now driven by uncertainty. They are afraid of being robbed, being attacked, of being intimidated, or by the fact that those immigrants could go after this European civilization that will not defend themselves. They're ousted by the pressure of Islam, by codes such as hijab, or the fact that some clothes are not allowed for women in the neighborhoods. And they will have to understand that they are not now home, that they will have to leave, and that they will be replaced by this population not a European. You have to understand that the French state, and I said it already, invests thousands of euros financing this migration. But we also have, if we compare the public money that its citizen has between this campaign and what happens outside with equal incomes, let's say that the public money goes from €1 to 1,000. In Paris, we have 100,000 of public money per citizen. It is a migrant city. And in Verdun, which is outside Paris, and it is a rural city, there's only €1 of social aid. So migrants are really favored for it because of employment and public service such as libraries, more classes, with only 15 students, access to pools, to media library, to transport. These are privileged zones funded by public money. While we forget the peripheries in France because they don't complain. More classes. And that's what they do. What expectations do you have in order to see a reaction from that middle class in order to avoid this from happening? Or how can they manage that discontent, Carlos? Well, in this case, I'm not so optimistic. The ones who can afford it live their traditional lifestyle. So they break up with everything. They either stay home because they can't go out anymore and play, so you stay with technology at home because the street is not safe anymore. You rely on your selective identities and not the global that you share with your peers because it doesn't exist anymore. I think there are concrete measures that can be taken. For instance, I think that today, in France, fiscal benefits exist for businesses with lower interest rates. I think we must stand all social aid and public money for this cause and give it to the peripheries in France, to those cities. So these regions can attract businesses and employment for those French people who deserve it and that are forgotten today. We have Joan Garriga with us, who is the speaker of Vox in Catalonia. How can they make up the low birth rate? Not with politics, but bringing migrants. And this is to deal with Muslims and Islam that we're dealing on with in Catalonia. And that advances, Pujol and nationalists thought that the natural immigration that could come wasn't liked by Spain and the Iberosphere. Why? Because those are migrants who speak Spanish. So they integrate themselves quite easy. This is a common language. It is also in Catalonia. So they wouldn't learn Catalonian language really well. They don't have that necessity. And also because the connection that we have with the Hispanic people, these brothers from our sphere, is quite obvious. We share a common story with these brotherhood countries. They know Spanish history, they know Spain is cultural plural, it has various regions, it has different populations, a huge cultural diversity that makes our population better, and this harms them, because they can tell how exclusive Catalonian nationalism is. Their made-up story that they had a different vision from Spain than the rest of the Spaniards. The fact that they say that Spain is an upper-served country. So, what do? Cheer for the Muslim. Are Arabian or Moroccan migration. We defend our nationality because it is a reality that the demographic pyramid is turning upside down. There will be more elders and less younglings, so the solution is not import people from other countries, but gaining births on our country and defending what's ours. Those who want to come will be welcomed, but they will have to integrate themselves, not strengthen that multiculturalism that causes so many problems. And we mustn't import cultures that are not compatible with our civilization, our rights, and our freedoms. Because that's the Islamism threat. The foreign law must also be fulfilled. That's why it exists. Those last years we are used to it because politicians don't do it in the country, but big walls will make good neighbors. And strong breaches allow good relationships. The foreign law must also be fulfilled. That's why it exists.
Former Arana clinics.
Politicians don't do it in the country, but big walls will make
The new Center for Migrants.
and strong breaches allow good relationships. The foreign law must also be fulfilled. That's why we've traveled to the Basque Country in order to talk about migration here. Because despite this illegal migration is affecting especially to the Canary Islands, when in the last days there were more than 30,000 illegal migrants this year so far, those migrants are being distributed through different places in the peninsula. One of those places is the Basque Country. In order to see how this migration is affecting this region, this province, we went to Victoria, and we have with us Amaya Martinez, Deputy of Vox in the Basque Parliament. We now have a huge number of migration. We are really worried about illegal immigration. We are feeling it in our neighborhoods. They used to be safe. The kids could play on the streets and didn't have any problem coming back home. But now it is concerning. Those crimes have risen in at 22%. It is obvious, when you have menace, you have to deal with them. But those deputations don't really listen. They give them some money each month, they give them some lifestyle, but of course, the caregivers are desperate because they can deal with them. There is no control of the kids whatsoever when they are on the streets. There is no control. They can escape whenever they want. What we think, just like everyone with common sense, is that kids must be with their parents and not away from their families. It is curious that people talk about a welcome country with so many refugees outside here. They are living in other communities. And they don't seem to come back. What happened with this? That electoral promises had to make up all the time. Of course, PNV and Bildu win here. They managed for decades to expel those who didn't have that ideology. And we're here. The ones who remain are trying to defend that Spanish nationality that we have. We're focusing now on how that migration affects Europe and Spain. Rubén Pulido, expert in migration, is with us. Some years ago, I labeled this as a migratory deep. This is out of control. Decades ago, most of illegal immigration that reached our shores did it through the strait in the northern coast of Morocco. They arrived to Cadiz. Those ships arrived to Malaga too. There was some migration that arrived to the Canary Islands, but it didn't have anything to do with what we are seeing these last years. There is an Algerian route that connects Almeria with Murcia, Levante, and Baleares, with Spanish territory. Migratory pressure on the rise, especially since 2019, and authorities didn't do anything. They didn't stop them. They didn't identify them. We don't really know who comes, where they are coming from, and what intentions they have. They're not people running away from religious persecutions. They are Syrians that, according to police reports, are paying around 5,000 euros in order to make that route. Those are Syrians used to travel in places with a huge radicalization who are being monitored by national police. It is a reflection of that migration deep, where every possible route is now active. It's the same all over again. When 40 ships sail from Oran, for instance, our security forces will intercept 14 or 15 of them. There are like 20 that will enter without registration. We forget about Ceuta and Melilla when there are no attacks on the border, on the fences. But Ceuta and Melilla are always living on the threat. A migratory threat in Ceuta, for example. There each week we have migratory entries on that border fences. There is some sub-Saharan migration on the other side of the Ceuta border. There's taking some entries attempts all the time. Until now, it is only tenths of them the ones who do it. But that doesn't rule out that as time goes by, thousands of them do. It happened in Melilla. Every time surrounding the NGOs, there is an immigration sector that I call immigration ENC. All of them are gaining money. More and more humanitarian organizations are registering actually in Spain, especially the most notorious places of that migration. And every time these organizations are gaining a more important role, let's say it, managing illegal migration. And obviously there is a benefit right there. They created an attraction factor without comparison. They have a fluid communication with the whole Maghreb. They know perfectly which the back doors are in our foreign law in order to take this illegal migration. And obviously, they must be investigated for those ties that they had these last years. They have a fluid communication with the whole Maghreb. Let's talk about Europe. Some police method and the security crisis, which makes that this illegal migration doesn't slow down. So it is obvious that something's wrong. Josema Vallejo is the vice president of police in the 21st century. And we also have Giorgi Bakondi, who is general and the secretary of state in the Security Council of the Prime Minister of Hungary. We need a model of police, of security that is both preventive and reactive, and a model that allows us to develop as people in an equal society and in a free society. How? Breaking that false debate of freedom versus security. When people say you have to give away some freedom in order to gain some security, I say no, it's quite the opposite. If we guarantee a state that is safe, we will be able to develop freedom and all of the rights that we have. This security to freedom debate is false if we don't accept that security will lead us to freedom. It will lead us to develop ourselves as free and equal people. So, what's going on with these foreign people? Don't we want them here? Don't we want them as equals? No, quite the opposite. We want them to come with the adequate conditions. Those conditions. That's why I said that we need a process where rights are amplified. Why? The Hungarian government thinks that we have to try to resolve the problems inside a country. Obviously, there is a different ideology in each country, so it is difficult to point out exactly how to act. Since 2015 in Hungary, there's been masses of immigration that come through the Balkans, and they come from Asia, they come from Turkey to Greece, Serbia too, and they arrived to the Hungarian border. So in 2015, in 4 months or 3 months and a half, 400,000 immigrants arrived. They crossed the border illegally, and so Hungary spoke with the European Union, and of course we're a European Union member, and we made clear that we had to figure out what to do in Hungary because so many people arrived, and these people didn't want to stay. They wanted to go to Austria, Germany, France, and maybe Sweden and Italy. But they didn't want to stay here. So the Hungarian government decided that we would ask our people. We would make a referendum in order to see what they want. So we made a national consultation and we asked the Hungary people what to do with these people. Do we send them on a train to Hungary and led them to put our security on risk and that they go all the way, or Do we think that this is illegal immigration and we put a stop to it? Well, 3.5 million, a huge majority, more people actually, than the one who voted the ruling party, decided that we had to stop this. So the government in Hungary set some principles. The first one was offering or solving problems where they were. Right at the beginning, and not importing these problems to Hungary. Right on those days, the government in Hungary is sending help in order to assist the situation. Or solving problems where they were. Manuel Vázquez is the president of Police for the 21st Century. It seems that the politicians, the executive branch, is trying to penetrate in all of the state institutions. Executive wants to be legislative. Apparently, sentences will be reviewed by political assemblies. It wants to be legislative. It wants to be it all. It wants to be judiciary. The third authority of the state, the president of the Congress, is a friend of the president. The lawyer of the courts wants to implement this amnesty that we're selling, and he's a friend of you-know-who, politics everywhere. Well, in police, it is exactly the same. In police, it is exactly the same. The ones who make the strategies, the ones who lead action, are absolutely poisoned by politics. And it is impossible like this. Instead of having a police leader, we have different ones. But a leader is something else. A leader is someone who, against the problems we're dealing with, against the different illegal immigration processes that we're living with, and the impact that he has in freedom and in our security, will already come out to communicate to people with the right uniform and authority, with a reasonable speech like, look, without borders, there is no security. Therefore, without borders, there is no freedom. Without borders, there is no prosperity. The oldest civilization had walls. Today, in so many Spanish and European cities, there are walls. And they didn't do it to exclude. They did it to protect their own. We tend to come together. They also do. They form gangs. Because inside them, they do feel strong. Because what they don't get legally, they do inside the gang. So it gives them power and status. So any 15 or 16-year-old who doesn't know where his heart is wishes to have some power and status, so criminal groups are formed early on. In Spain, we have a second and third generation problem. Madrid has exploded with Latin gangs. But people don't really know. Latin gangs are a problem, but it is not as big as the one we're going to have when African gangs appear and they start fighting for the products and the territory. It's like all the gangs in the world. Products and territory are not infinite. The more gangs fight for them, the more violence will be. Don't really know. Latin gangs are a problem, but it is not as big as the one we're going to have when African. So media hides certain relevant data related to illegal immigration. When a crime is committed in Spain or Europe, the nationality of the criminal is hidden of that aggressor. In order to talk about that and how media influences that control of illegal immigration and the security of European nations, we have two participants. Adam Starczynski, editor of Visegrad 24, of that aggressor. In order to talk about that and Antonio Muloni, editor of La Gaceta de la Iberosfera. It is really interesting how media interacts with migration. The Democrat Party, similar to Vox here in Spain, is a group that grew incredibly in Sweden, inside Parliament. We had a 4% of representation. Next elections, we had 13. After that, we had 18. And now it's more than 20%. This advance has been possible thanks to media, because there were some alternative websites that informed of the crimes made by migrants that were ignored by other media. After that, we had 18. And now it's more than 20%. This advance has been possible thanks to media. I have no doubt that what media say doesn't have much to do with the reality of most citizens in other countries. The own media owners, the main ones, of the biggest ones, are the same. And they are people very interested on that population moves from places with no resources to some they do. Faculties of communication, schools of communication, and journalism that never, if they ever were a place where this job was taught, now they're not. They don't teach how to inform, how to say what's happening, and that's it. Now they teach them how to say whatever it is wanted to be said. And that is what it is in the journal's staffs, television, traditional media. That drip, that day after day of information and opinions is gaining weight. Traditional media will end up saying what's happening. But it certainly will be late. They will talk about illegal immigration when millions of people that don't want to live in Europe will. People that don't want Europe to be Europe will. And the problem won't be, in my opinion, immigration, the movement of people, but the localization. Where do these people live? And the new societies they're creating, all equals in the name of difference, all well recognized. If you go to the main street of any European city of the West, and the shops are the same, the landscape is the same, all in the name of multiculturalism. So that reality that is imposing itself will end up on those media. All equals in the name of difference, all well recognized. If you go to the main street of any We're still talking about illegal immigration and the course that Brussels has taken to control this migratory invasion. Herman Terz, deputy of Vox in Europe. The catastrophe we already could see, because it is a catastrophe that has been forming 40 or 50 years ago. It's a catastrophe which is speeding up in the last 20 or 25 in Europe, and that arrives to the year 2015 when Ms. Merkel, with a pressure from different parties that had different opinions, said that borders were open because Germans could do it. They said, we will achieve it, which is like a myth. And it has a huge calling effect to Europe that continues today. But above all, has a huge effect. That is the fact that it has destroyed German society as it was. German society has transformed in the last 10 years radically and irreversible, with some damages that are immense and benefits not so many. And this is what is creating a political saturation situation in Germany right now. We don't know how this is going to be. We don't know if the Scholz German government will last until December or a little more. But certainly, it doesn't seem like it will last until June, until the European elections. That's going to change the whole landscape, and it is going to open new added possibilities to the changing of the political map in Europe. And this is coming in a big way because of migration, of the sickness, of the hypocrisy that has been allowed by the classes of the establishment. There were so many people that said that what was going on in Europe, the degradation in Europe and the United States, is that memory of war was lost. Memories of real priorities of what's important were lost. And what's an accessory and what's ridiculous. And suddenly, our priority is the ridiculous. We're living in a moment where it seems that there is a political and social competition to see who protects women the most. And, however, social consensus seems to agree to those who call themselves feminists and that built a feminist story surrounding us that, however, it's ending with our societies. All of my life I felt a safe woman. I thought I lived in a safe country. When I was young, I could party, come back home, walking on the street, and I was never worried because of something could happen to me. Honestly, I felt I was really assured. However, last year, in 2022, I was pointed with a gun. When I was young, I could party. So for me, this is interesting. How things have changed. How this has evolved. How security in Spain in the last years has evolved. Suddenly, that a woman is pointing on with a gun, and the ones who are doing so come from Morocco, we can talk about that. So we're going to cancel it. We're going to censor it. Violence can be shown. But that which comes from a certain part of society, not in this case, from illegal immigrants, that can be shown. Women all over the world have been convinced that the problems are that they are discriminated because of fatphobia, right? Or that there are micro-sexism. It's curious, right? All of this while ministers with huge budgets tell us so.
How much does illegal migration cost us? ABC said in 2018, the last year that they made a news like that
That they would pay around 20 million euros yearly. Now they clarify in that news that this quantity was for repatriations, for the locating of those migrants, for surveillance in the sea and land borders. But they admitted that really the cost of everything that comes after, surveillance, tools, etc., are millions. We don't pay 20 million euros. The last budget that the Immigration Ministry was around 130 million euros yearly, but this is the same case. This budget is for receiving them, allocate them, and later God will say. But we never know how much exactly. I'm tired because nothing changes. And we are not listening on this topic. How we have to think, how we must solve this problem. As we know, and later with the demographic data, this active population is not reproducing themselves at a fast rate. And migrants are. They are the ones who benefit the most from the welfare state. We're not. So how we do turn this around? I know something that won't help. The fact that we listen to the left and feminists who say it is a problem of toxic masculinity, because it is not. They are the ones who benefit the most. I think that we want men, European men, to stand up, wake up, and protect us, European women, that they help and defend us. Unfortunately, we're facing this reality. I don't think that it is safe, intelligent, or realist saying to any young lady in Europe or in the West that they can go walking back home alone. No, it is not like that. If we want change and not being afraid, we must say the truth about this and see who are guilty of it. Western toxic men or not, but men who migrate here with many different opinions and different perspectives that often have to do with religion and culture. So, I think we must see more men and women moving in Madrid. And just like we've seen some days ago, screaming that Europe is a continent which is not Muslim. Germany is a Christian country, not Muslim. We must see more men and women moving in Madrid. Right now we kick off a new panel in which we will focus on those European cities that are more affected by the illegal migration, such Barcelona, where we are right now, Paris, or Brussels. With that problem that big European cities have with illegal immigration, Santiago Mucio will talk about it. He's lawyer and director of the SET. Most European cities have abandoned what has made Europe strong. They have abandoned Christianism. They have abandoned that idea of civilization in order to throw themselves to some kind of crazy message that we have to let all migrants in. We have to get them. This reminds us of that Chesterton quote, modernity. What would happen in modernity with Christian virtues is that some would remain, but they would become crazy. Today, in Europe, we have some kind of leftovers of what Christian charity was. And this is that people is naturally good and say to other people, well, we have to welcome all those in need in the world. But it is physically impossible. In Europe, And this leads to a consequence. Well, there are some of them. But there's one that I think that is the backbone of all the conversations we saw this morning. This consequence, no doubt, is the terrible insecurity. There is something in common between these three countries. Three cities which used to be magnificent. They still are in an architectural point of view, but these are cities where it's difficult to live. We saw that on the panel where you were the guest with Eva and Maria, and you talked about how hard it is for a woman walking calmly on the street. Or that thing where women put loose clothes in order to not show in feminine beauty. It is something incredible in Europe. Why this is happening to us in Europe? I think the answer is pretty simple. And it is more profound. It is not only about immigration. It's about something more profound. It's about what kind of immigration we're accepting today in Europe. And if there is something that allows and gives us something in common with this migration, is probably that they still profess a religion, in its most majority, or at least in a cultural level, they profess a religion that is Islam. That's a fact. While in Europe we don't profess a religion, because religion and that practice is on decline, all of these people profess Islam. Am I saying that Islam is violent? Islam is based on a conduct rule that is Sharia. It is the law applied to them. And if we take a European court decision about human rights in 2001, it says that Sharia is totally incompatible with democratic values of the Western societies. We have a decision from the European Court of Human Rights that says that at the same time, we have all the courts that with different decisions of European courts drastically opening borders in order to let come to us all of that population that has a common culture, and it is a religious one. What moves men, what gives them strength to men in order to say something, to transcend normal, and to be able to go beyond is religious. Something that has no precedent in human history. It is the first time that European countries are paying for making people who invade to come to their harbors, their home. Because we can talk not only about immigration, but invasion. Am I saying that everyone who comes wants to invade Europe? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that a lot of that people are invading Europe. There is a dirty game of everyone in the left. And I think that the whole European left, all of left parties, which have seen that in the 90s, there is a huge breach because of the colonial effects and the loss of reuniting families in several countries, that immigration has risen up, something that would not stop. Today, in places like France, we have Census Avenue, where 30% of people who live there are immigrants, considered as first-generation immigrants, meaning foreigners who were born abroad. 30%. This according to official data, plus all of illegal immigrants who were there, plus all of immigrants of first and second generation. Today, if you go to Census Avenue, you won't find, or you will in a strange and casual way, to someone once called a Frenchman, because most of them have French nationality. The left saw that, and saw that there was a ground of voting that was very good in that population, because it is a population that has lots of kids. More than the ones that European women have nowadays. The birth rate is higher in that population than in European population. Civilization on the West is at risk with the consequence of this illegal immigration. Its values, its principles, all that has to do with the West. Let's analyze this matter with two guests that are with me now. Manuel Gavira, deputy in Cádiz and a spokesperson of Vox in Andalucía, and Juanjo Coca. Its values, its principles, all that. Analysis is made. A studio is made of our judiciary rules, and a whole reform is made. like a draft of a law. And that relates to 5 fundamental topics. One of them is the civil code, in which regulates how can a foreigner get the nationality. It is related to the penal code and the penitentiary general law, which regulates the expulsion of foreigners condemned by the crimes commission. It talks about menas, asking for reintegration, looking for the way of how could they be reintegrated to the family or minor services in their home countries. It makes a modification of Law 12.9 from October the 30th that regulates the asylum right and subsidiary protection in the sense of getting some speed in the proceedings and the focus on third world countries, like Italy has recently done. And after, we have an important point that these reforms deals with, that is the foreigners law. A full reform of the foreigners law in which expulsion, deportation to third world countries, hot returns, and after residence permissions are regulated. What I mean is that from philosophy, from the fight of the ideas, we move to active politics in practice. This is where we believe that the battle it is today. That's why we wanted to take this occasion to introduce this report here today. In a national level too, who comes into our country? How can you access to our country? What conditions, what requirements do migrants need to access to nationality? It's very important because in that way, in the same level, it can be regulated in some way what's happening, and I'll talk about it in a second. Even in an autonomical level. There is no administration, and excuse me for speaking about my homeland to Andalusia, but there is no administration with a bigger database in Spain, like the health services in Andalusia. We're insisting a lot about Andalusia in the last term and the current one, that the forces of the state have all the data of all of those migrants who arrived to Andalusia. But there is no administration with a bigger database at our European level. It is very important. It is because we know the situation we have at a national level and the things that happened this last few hours and how worrying is this situation. But next year we have elections for the European Parliament, and that's where we must. Because let's focus on it, just like other European countries, like Hungary, like Poland, with a clear direction in order to fight this attack and this decay that Western civilization is suffering. It is very important. We have to. And again, excuse me for talking about my homeland, but we have to focus. We have to battle the European institutions because some months away there are elections. I think that there is a solution. There is a solution because you can see that reaction amongst young people and that illusion. And also, I was talking about the battle of ideas, but the battle of ideas wouldn't be possible with people like Manolo. People like Jorge Buxade from European Parliament. It wouldn't be possible without people that, at the end of the day, with that political action that they take, it is impossible. It is very important to point out where the battle of ideas is. But after, the practical modifications in active politics need revision. It exists on the law, but it is not applied. And we have to focus on that too. It is so important that I insist, and I will talk about my homeland again and what's coming in a few months, is that we understand the importance of that upcoming elections in the EU, that we are one of the patriotic countries that defend the rights and interests of our country, in order to later give importance to other things. If migration needs regulation, so be it, but with the conditions this country can admit. Spain has that possibility of our country, in order to later give importance to other things. Since this morning we've talked about the problems of illegal migration, its consequences, and above all, we have focused and analyzed the mistakes that so many countries in Europe are making. Amongst them, ours, Spain. However, there are cases, not so many, but there are, of success of some European nations that are knowing how to manage this problem with illegal migration. We're going to talk about that with Jorge Buxade, head of the Vox delegation in the European Parliament. We'll have on our heads two nations, which are Hungary and Poland. There are a model of success. You only have to walk around Budapest or Warsaw or any other city of those countries to see that an essential element is maintaining a community that is an homogeneity. It doesn't mean that we are all equal, but there must be some homogeneity that guarantees the democracy's efficacy, the rule of the people. So we must determine the existence of people with some things in common, that shares values, that shares traditions, that shares habits. But not only do we have Hungary and Poland, I think that we also have to point out that there are things that are changing. Outside the EU, we have Sweden. Sweden does also have a model that is hard, in the sense that they protect the borders and its labor market. In Sweden, if you don't have a labor contract, you can't stay in Sweden. Or even nations like Denmark that are adopting serious measures and severe for controlling immigration. So the first thing to take into account is that it can be done. Illegal immigration can be controlled. In order to make a living in Europe, you must have a labor contract. If you don't have it, if you haven't been called legally by a company, if you have entered or tried so by a place not fit for that, and I'm not talking about ships or mafias, but jumping the fences, or someone illegal that arrives to Barcelona or Madrid airports and pretends to stay, well, he can't. This is one thing. There's other hoods deeper. For instance, if someone takes a look to the history of illegal immigration in countries like France, like Denmark or Sweden, one of the elements more serious that have produced an expansion of that migration that we call massive are the gathering of families politics. Let's forget ideologies. Let's go to data. It is a lie. The unemployment rate among immigrants is way higher than Europeans. I have here the data. I think from 2021, because I took notes, 26% of unemployment in the whole European Union. Between European nationals, taking into account that Spain and Greece percentages are so high. But in the European population, amongst foreigners, there's a 41%. Residence permissions, most of them who are granted on Europe are residents of studies, of the residence itself without a job permission. And if you look at the stats, there is something called others. Others, what's that? Labor permissions are 20%. What's going on here? Easy. There's a directive that Spain had to make disappear, and I want to say that so many countries in the European Union didn't do. From 27, only 20. So there are 7 countries who didn't do it. But it's a directive that was in place when Rajoy was in the government. So, some time has passed by, and the government of Rajoy already didn't do it with the Popular Party. And he is to make a list of safe countries. Countries in which, if someone comes and says that he's a refugee or politically persecuted, in most of cases we could say, no, that's your safe country. With President Sanchez, and the government of Rajoy, when we had the cases of the murders in Belgium or France, where the totality of those murders was from people who were in that situation of illegality, now they want to accelerate it, actually. But until the point of that, we can take that biometric data of a foreigner who's younger than 14 years old. But however, to any Spaniard or European national, we know that if our kids want to go abroad, they must take their ID. And they are like forced to it, but not with foreigners. And there was a legislation who advocated in that way, because there was a necessity right there. There was that those who came to our territory could get the nationality, because it wasn't typical. It was special. But when millions are entering Europe each year, legally and illegally, it is obvious that nationality rules need to change. And it is one of the most important things. Not hardening them, but adjusting to reality the requirements of getting that nationality. There are so many nations that are doing so. Denmark, for instance. Denmark demands legal residence, and besides, another requirement that we don't have in Spain. In the period of legal residence that you pass in order to get the nationality, you couldn't get any social aid. You can only, in a year maximum, or 5 as maximum. For example, this is a measure that wants to make sure that the one who's been here for several years and wants to be recognized as Danish, well, let's see if you're integrated. One key element of this is having a labor contract. You can only, in a year maximum, or to be in the labor market, or 5. Knowing the language, knowing the story, knowing the culture, knowing the society and traditions. There are many things that can be done. We can be very creative and respectful with human rights all over the world, because we have to be very respectful with our compatriots first.
We came to Barcelona for something.
Because it is a city and a region that is quite affected by this illegal migration. That's why we wanted to celebrate the summit. Why is it important that we kept celebrating Frontera Sur as years go by?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank ETR Party for the initiative of putting on this event, this so important meeting, and thanking the organization because I know a lot of hard work was put there, starting from our dear Rocío Emer, and all behind cameras, realization, the one who cleans the carpet before this event begins, all those people who have made this so important event possible in a moment so important where, as you have said during the day, it is an urgent topic that we have to deal, and we have to put on the center of the political debate. Reality is that this is affecting lots of neighborhoods, lots of cities, and in a special way. That's why, if you allow me so, I'm going to focus in this region, in this part of Spain, in Catalonia. As it's been said during the day, I had the opportunity to listen to magnificent guests, and without a doubt, I think this is one of the main political urgencies that must be on the center of the political debate. We're used, unfortunately, that some and other people put a political focus on things that are so far away from reality, actually. Families are facing, good people and normal people are facing. Thanks to political parties like Vox and so many other partners of Vox in the whole Europe, finally a debate was open that they seem to want it closed. Those who don't want us to speak and denounce reality that good people are suffering, the consequences of that politics that they promote leads them to expulsions from parliaments, open filings, and we don't know how far they'll go. But they forget, or they don't realize, is that we will keep fighting. We will keep fighting the defense and the denounce of those politics, and above all, something that I'll talk about, that right that we have to defend what we are. That right to defend what we want to be, and the right to defend our civilization. Here in Catalonia, unfortunately, on the one hand, separatism has met with the leftist politicians. In this case, in the Partido Socialista. Both, unfortunately, have shared a project for so many times, and without a doubt, they both decided in Catalonia not to exist political freedom. That political freedom not only to get out from the consensus that they have decided all Catalonia must be submitted to, but even to silence those who want to form an alternative, raise a different flag in migration politics, for example. And they say we have no right to dissent. That's why they promote this permanent politics of demonization, of twisting the message, which is and I said it a lot of times, the birth of the national Islamization and European. Let the data speak for themselves, actually. Last year, Catalonia was the Spanish region that had more detentions in jihadist operations. With respect to crimes, because it is also important to put on notice the action that exists, no matter how much do they want to deny it, between illegal migration and lack of security, there is a direct relationship. And I want that everyone that is watching us are aware of how absurd, how grave it is a point that we have reached. Why one deputy in one place, like is Catalonia? Because of the fact that he says the penitentiary data, when it is obvious that there are more foreigners than Spaniards in prison, is censored. Why saying that more of 60% of steals in Catalonia are made by foreigners? is he silenced? Why saying that 65% of drug traffic in Catalonia is made by foreigners are we silenced? I want to make a call to all Catalonians, all Spaniards, and all of our compatriots to be conscious of how mediatic power silences permanently reality. That reality that they have been condemned by those powerful ones or those politicians who are far away from problems for normal people. And this is clearly evident on speeches, how they silence the dramatic phenomenon of the illegal immigration that we're having, how they silence how Islamism has raged an open war in Europe, how it is clear that we are seeing neighborhoods in Catalonia, in Spain, even in the rest of Europe clearly that have lost that identity, that some even could have enjoyed, like playing football in the town's squares, how all of that could be taken away by some. That's why it is a fight. The denouncing of the consequences of illegal immigration and the protection of the borders that goes beyond security. It is a fight for freedom. It is a fight for defending our rights. It is a fight, as I said, for the right that we have to keep being what we are. We want Catalonia to keep being Catalonia. We don't want that Catalonia becomes Algeria, and that's something that we will reiterate, no matter what, and without caring about who's upset about it. And I insist that those debates that we have opened, some that were started a long time ago, but I want to encourage everyone to keep fighting in opening those debates, that some have decided to have no room in politics debate, because that's how, if we fight in the cultural war, we can achieve first, guarantee that thing that some don't want us to be. And above all, and the most important thing, is to denounce and contribute to the fact that those who promote a social engineering project of trying to end with our civilization's roots, with trying to subvert forms of life and even the laws that rule our judiciary code, that we have the capacity to convince more Spanish, more European every time, in order to say that time has arrived to decide between civilization and barbaric, between a Christian Europe and a Muslim one. And I am convinced that Spain is waking up, and Europe too. More Spanish, more European every time, in order to say that time has arrived to decide between civilization. And we close this super meeting of Frontera Sur from Barcelona with the president of Vox, Santiago Pascal. And I am convinced I can't start talking without sharing the pain that we still have because of the assassination attempt of our colleague and friend Alejo Vidal Cuadras, of the one who was president of Vox. National sovereign is on sale. Inside, for the separatists, and outside, for international agendas that nobody voted for. We've accused President Sanchez of being the worst president of the last 80 years. And probably we fell short. Because national sovereignty has been given to separatism, and it has been given to an absolute suicidal agenda of open borders. This is what's been denouncing on the third summit of Frontera Sur. He's willing to step above the Constitution, to destroy its core, attacking the base of any democracy, the separation of powers to include or to seal an amnesty law dealing with criminals. The socialist and separatist coup to the institutions in Spain is inseparable in our country from illegal immigration. Because Sanchez and his partners in crime share a position against sovereignty in our country and against the safe borders that any society needs. The ones who support broken borders, the ones who facilitate the collaboration of NGOs and mafias in order to traffic with people, those who do not condemn Islamist terrorism, and those who want to hide the cases of violence and rapes because of illegal and massive immigration are the ones who are in government right now. They are the separatist allies from the Basque Country and Catalonia. Barcelona is a city that you can visit, actually. Probably during those days, it was a pleasant city. Today, it is a city unrecognizable. It is the capital of thieves and insecurity in Spain. Salafist mosques have risen up, so those who want to destroy our society and how we are and how we live can do it without consequences. It is time to say and to decide if we say yes to Europe or say yes to Eurabia. Some of us say yes to Europe, our lifestyle, our traditions, our freedom, our culture, and our democracy, without consequences. It is time to say and to decide if we say yes to Europe or say yes to Eurabia. Some of us say yes to Europe, our lifestyle, our traditions, our freedom, our culture, and our democracy, without consequences. It is time to say and to decide if we say yes to Europe or say yes to Eurabia. Some of us say yes to Europe, our lifestyle, our traditions, our freedom, our culture, and our democracy, without consequences. It is time to say and to decide if we say yes to Europe or say yes to Eurabia. Some of us say yes to Europe, our lifestyle, our traditions, our freedom, our culture.